Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really immersing ourselves in a single massive confrontation, one that, honestly, permanently redrew the map of the ancient world. We aren't just covering a battle, we're trying to dissect the moment an empire that had spanned millennia effectively just ceased to exist.
Yeah.
We are talking about Gaugamela, fought on October 1st, 331 BC.
It really is the ultimate turning point. And framing it as almost like an extinction event for the Achaemenid Empire, that's pretty accurate, I think.
Right.
Gaugamela was the final desperate roll of the dice for Darius III. Its outcome didn't just mean another victory for Alexander the Great, it really confirmed the complete conquest of that vast Persian Empire.
And set the stage for everything that came next.
Exactly. The next 3 centuries, basically. The Hellenistic age all hinges on this one day.
Okay, so before we jump straight into the fighting, let's just pause and think about the incredible stakes here. Alexander is already deep into Asia.
Oh, yeah.
2 years before this, 333 BC, he'd already stunned everyone at Issus.
Yeah.
Huge victory.
Huge. And captured the most valuable hostages imaginable.
Darius's wife, his mother Gambis, his daughters. I mean, incredible leverage.
That's the psychological backdrop, absolutely. But what's really masterful, I think, is what Alexander did after Issus. He didn't just chase Darius immediately into the heartland.
No, he secured its flanks first, right?
Precisely. Secured his rear, his lines of communication, methodically took the entire Levant coast. That included the really grueling 7-month siege of Tyre.
Which was just an unbelievable feat of engineering in itself.
Monumental. Then he secures Egypt, the breadbasket, really critical, where the Persian governor, Mazaces, just surrendered peacefully.
Handed it over.
Yeah. So by the time Alexander finally turns northeast, heading towards the Tigris River in 331, he's eliminated every single threat to his supply lines. He controls the entire eastern Mediterranean coast.
This wasn't just a raid anymore.
No, this was calculated, total conquest, step by step.
And Darius III, he knew it, didn't he? You can see it in his actions. He shifts from just preparing for war to actively trying to buy peace. Repeatedly.
Yes, the diplomatic efforts. We know of at least 3 escalating attempts at negotiation before Gaugamela. It really speaks volumes about how the power dynamic was shifting.
So what were the offers?
Well, after Issus, the initial ones were mostly focused on getting his family back, securing a truce. Started with a huge sum, 10,000 talents of silver.
Which Alexander just refused.
Flat out refused. Then, after Alexander took Tyre in Egypt, the stakes went way up. The second offer included marriage to his daughter, Statera II, and Darius offered to cede all Persian territory west of the Helis River in Asia Minor.
Wow, west of the Helis. That's basically giving up all of modern Turkey, Anatolia, the entire western gateway to the empire.
It's an enormous concession. It's basically acknowledging Alexander's control over the whole Aegean coast and its hinterland.
Still not enough for Alexander.
Not even close. The third, the final offer, made just before Gaugamela, historically is just staggering. Darius offered to surrender all territory west of the Euphrates River.
West of the Euphrates. So Syria, Phoenicia, Egypt. All formally ceded.
Yes. Plus, he offered to make Alexander a formal co-ruler of the Achaemenid Empire, offered another daughter's hand in marriage, and just a colossal sum of money, 30,000 talents of silver.
30,000 talents. Can you give us some context? How much is that, really?
It's almost impossible to overstate. A single talent was about 60 pounds of silver. So 30,000 talents. It's just an astronomical weight of currency.
Like more wealth than any one person could possibly spend.
Easily. Some modern estimates figure the entire annual revenue of the Achaemenid Empire was maybe around 15,000 talents, perhaps a bit more some years. So this offer was a potentially double the yearly income of the largest empire the world had ever seen.
Alexander would have been instantly outrageously wealthy, the most powerful figure in the Mediterranean world. Guaranteed peace treaty with the East. Why wasn't he tempted?
That's the million-talent question, isn't it? Even his most senior general, Parmenion, reportedly advised him to accept it. You know the story.
Right. Parmenion supposedly said, if I were Alexander, I would accept.
And Alexander's reply, pure Alexander ego, really. So should I if I were Parmenion.
What does that refusal tell us about his ultimate goal for Asia?
It tells us he was rejecting the entire Persian model of empire, fundamentally. Darius was offering a traditional setup. Alexander could be a powerful client king, ruling a huge chunk of territory under the Persian umbrella.
Like the Persians had done for centuries with local rulers.
Exactly. Managing their vast lands through satrapies, power-sharing deals. Darius was trying to fit Alexander into that existing system, but Alexander, He envisioned something radically different.
One king.
One king. A unified, autocratic, Hellenistic monarchy where he was the sole, undisputed king of Asia, holding power by conquest, not by Darius's permission.
So accepting the money, the co-rulership, would have meant acknowledging Darius was still the legitimate great king.
Precisely. By refusing, Alexander was basically saying, you're already beaten, your only choice now is total surrender or total war. The gauntlet was thrown down, no turning back.
Okay, so Alexander rejects the final offer. He begins the march from Egypt towards this final showdown, and right away there's a major strategic choice he makes.
Yes, the route.
He avoids the direct, hot southern route towards Babylon, the one that other armies had taken before, like Cyrus the Younger decades earlier, which ended badly at Cunaxa.
Right. Instead, he chose a northern passage, up through Mesopotamia.
Why? What was the thinking there?
Well, this route choice is probably foundational to the whole success of the battle. Some historians argue really compellingly that this northern move achieved strategic surprise.
Surprise? How so?
Darius might have fully expected Alexander to take the faster southern route, which would have allowed the Persians to use scorched earth tactics, burn the land ahead of him, poison wells.
Make the march itself a weapon.
Exactly. Potentially forcing Alexander's army to arrive near Babylon already exhausted, suffering from heat, short on supplies, a perfect setup for the Persians, maybe repeating that Cunaxa scenario where the invading army just falls apart.
But hang on, wasn't the Persian army still waiting for him when he crossed the Tigris River? If they were there waiting, how much of a surprise could the northern route really have been?
Ah, that's a great point. And where there's some debate, others argue quite strongly that Darius might have been intentionally drawing Alexander towards Gaugamela all along.
Leaving him there?
Possibly. Look, the Persian governor Mazaeus had failed to defend the key river crossings. First the Euphrates, then the really difficult crossing of the Tigris. Once Alexander was across the Tigris, Darius had lost his natural defensive lines.
So he needed to fight on ground he chose.
Exactly. On his terms.
Yeah.
On ground, he could prepare meticulously. And Gaugamela, near modern-day Erbil in Iraqi Kurdistan, became that chosen, prepared battlefield.
And that preparation is absolutely critical to understanding what happens next. We might not know the exact spot today, maybe Tel Gomel, maybe Karamlasha, but we know Darius literally engineered the terrain.
He weaponized the ground itself. He ordered a vast plain to be cleared of all scrub, bushes, any uneven vegetation, everything flattened.
Why? Just to make it easier to see?
No, it was for one very specific reason, to maximize the effectiveness of his scythed chariots. He had about 200 of them.
Ah, the famous sized chariots, blades on the wheels.
Yep. Darius's plan was clear. Use terrain control to date the main advantage of the Macedonian infantry, their dense, disciplined phalanx formation. He wanted those chariots hitting the phalanx at full speed on a perfectly flat surface to just rip through the lines. It was a plan totally built around his specialist weapon.
So Alexander is marching towards this deliberately prepared killing field. And just before he gets there, something happens in the sky.
Yeah, a strange prelude. A near-total lunar eclipse, September 20th or 21st, 331 BC.
Which for ancient armies must have been unnerving.
Oh, definitely. Highly charged psychologically. An omen. A sign from the gods for both sides. But Alexander, ever the pragmatic commander, actually used it brilliantly.
How?
The eclipse happened shortly after his scouts located Darius's massive army already encamped and waiting. Since Darius wasn't moving, Alexander had the luxury of halting his own forces.
Ah, so he took a break.
He did. It allowed the Macedonians 4 full days of crucial, uninterrupted rest. Time for reconnaissance, psychological preparation, drilling. For a smaller army facing what they knew would be overwhelming odds, that rest period was invaluable. Reinforced discipline, focus, maybe counteracted some of the superstition's fear from the eclipse.
Okay, rest over. Time to face the music. Let's talk about the armies themselves, starting with the biggest problem for Alexander. The sheer numbers.
Yeah, the numerical imbalance. And when you look at the ancient sources for the Persian army size, well, the figures are kind of mind-boggling.
What do they say?
Well, Diodorus gives figures between 800,000 and 1 million troops. Arrian goes even higher, claiming Darius had over 1 million men in total, 1,040,000.
1 million men. I mean, from a purely logistical standpoint, feeding and watering an army that size in that region, it seems impossible, doesn't it?
Utterly impossible. Modern scholars universally agree these figures are, frankly, absurdly high.
So why write them down?
Well, they serve a rhetorical purpose, right? To exaggerate the impossible odds Alexander faced, which in turn amplifies his genius and the scale of his victory for posterity. makes for a better story.
So what are the more realistic estimates?
Modern consensus brings Darius's actual strength way down, maybe ranging from a conservative 50,000 up to perhaps 250,000 at the absolute highest, most generous end.
Still a huge army.
Oh, enormous. But the critical takeaway, which isn't disputed, is that Alexander was heavily outnumbered, maybe 4 or 5 to 1 in total forces, and critically massively outnumbered in cavalry, which was the key arm on that wide open plain.
Okay, let's look at Alexander's force then. Comparatively small but deadly, around 47,000 troops total.
Somewhere in that ballpark, yeah. About 47,000. But this wasn't just any army. This was the culmination of generations of military reform started by his father Philip II and perfected by Alexander himself.
Professional, discipline.
Highly professional, incredibly disciplined, and technologically superior. It was composed of about 31,000 heavy infantry. That's the core of the phalanx, the pejetairoi. Then you had around 9,000 light infantry peltasts, archers, javelin throwers,
And the hammer blow.
the cavalry, about 7,000 horsemen, crucially including the elite companion cavalry, arguably the best heavy cavalry in the world at that time.
And the centerpiece of their infantry's technological edge was the sarissa. We mentioned a lot, that 6-meter pike. What did that actually mean on the battlefield?
The sarissa just revolutionized infantry warfare. At 6 meters, that's nearly 20 feet long, sometimes even longer. It required both hands to wield properly.
So they couldn't carry a big shield.
No, just a smaller shield strapped to the forearm. But the tactical benefit was overwhelming. When they deployed in that dense phalanx formation, the pike points of the first 5 ranks projected out beyond the front line of men.
Creating this huge zone of sharp points.
Exactly, an impenetrable hedgehog of steel points. It gave them a reach advantage that no contemporary infantry or cavalry could match. It made the Macedonian heavy phalanx almost impervious to a frontal attack, especially from cavalry. Horses just wouldn't charge into that wall of spear tips. Darius had to find a way to break that formation.
Okay, contrast that drilled, uniformed Macedonian force with the Persian army. Even at the lower estimates, say 52,000 plus, it was much more mixed.
A mosaic, really. It was the traditional Achaemenid way of raising an army, levies pulled from across the vast empire. You had Bactrians, Scythians, Armenians, Indians, Parthians, Medians, all fighting in their own styles with their own equipment.
So the quality must have varied wildly.
Hugely variable. Darius relied heavily on his professional corps units, the 10,000 immortals, his elite personal guard, and critically, about 2,000 Greek mercenary hoplites.
Ah, heavy infantry fighting in the Greek style.
Yeah, they were probably the only infantry the Persians had that Alexander's commanders would have considered truly respectable, fighting in a phalanx formation themselves. The rest of the infantry were often regional levies, less heavily armed, less trained than the Macedonians.
And then the specialist weapons we mentioned.
Right, the ones Darius was banking on, the 200 scythed chariots ready for that flat ground, and about 15 Indian war elephants. Though the sources suggest the elephants were maybe kept in reserve, possibly because the Persians weren't entirely sure how best to use them in that specific battle, maybe unfamiliarity.
Okay, deployment. How did the armies line up? Darius followed tradition, didn't he? Put his best troops in the center with him.
Yes, standard Persian practice. Darius commanded the center himself, surrounded by his best infantry, the immortals, those Greek mercenaries, and his royal kinsman cavalry guard.
And his flanks. Huge cavalry wings, right?
Massive, crucial on this open plain. Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, commanded the powerful left flank. Lots of excellent Bactrian and Scythian cavalry there. Mazaeus commanded the right flank, also very strong in cavalry.
How did Alexander respond, being so outnumbered, especially in cavalry?
He divided his smaller army into 2 main wings. His trusted general Parmenion commanded the left wing, which was deliberately weaker numerically. Alexander himself took command of the right wing.
Where he put his best cavalry.
Exactly. He concentrated his elite companion cavalry there, ready to deliver the decisive blow, the hammer strike.
But given that massive Persian advantage in cavalry and the huge width of their line, wasn't Alexander incredibly vulnerable to being flanked, just surrounded?
Absolutely. Envelopment was the primary threat. He couldn't just deploy his troops in a single thin line. They'd be overlapped and crushed immediately.
So this is where his tactical innovation comes in again with the deployment itself.
It was absolutely critical. He had to assume the Persians would try to ride around his flanks. So, to counter this, He deployed his infantry phalanx in a revolutionary double line.
A double line, so reserves.
More than just reserves. The second line wasn't just waiting behind the first. They had specific instructions to act like a pivoting hinge. If, or rather when, the Persian cavalry tried to ride around the Macedonian flank, the rear ranks of the second line could instantly wheel outwards 90 degrees.
Forming a solid flank facing outward.
Exactly. Effectively turning the whole formation into a defensive square, or at least a rectangle, presenting pike points in all directions. It prevented a successful envelopment and protected the entire formation's vulnerable rear. It was a brilliant preemptive defense built right into the initial setup.
Okay, the scene is set. The armies are facing each other across this vast, cleared plain. The battle begins. And Alexander doesn't just sit there and wait for Darius to launch his chariots.
No, he seizes the initiative immediately. He starts a move that military historians still debate, was it pure genius or just pure recklessness?
What did he do?
He didn't march his army straight forward, directly at Darius' center. Instead, he began marching his entire line diagonally, moving towards the Persian left flank.
Diagonally? How did that work?
And critically, he kept his own wings echelon back at roughly a 45-degree angle from the main infantry line.
Can you help us visualize that? Echelons back?
Imagine the army like a wide door that's being slowly pushed, but one side is moving faster than the other. The leading edge, which was Alexander's right wing where he was, pushed forward and to the right. The trailing edge, Parmenian's left wing, deliberately held back, lagging behind.
Okay, why? What was the point of this strange diagonal staggered movement?
It served two crucial interlocking purposes. First, it was designed to lure the massive Persian cavalry on their left flank, the one commanded by Bessus, into reacting.
How?
By moving right, Alexander was threatening to move off the specially cleared ground that Darius had prepared for his chariots. Bessus had to react, had to stretch his own cavalry line further left and forward to stop Alexander from basically sidestepping the prepared battlefield.
So it forces the Persians to extend their line.
Exactly. And second, by moving diagonally away from the Persian center while drawing the Persian left flank further left, Alexander was deliberately creating distance, stretching the Persian line incredibly thin, especially between Bessus on the far left and Darius's position in the center. He was intentionally trying to open up a seam, a gap, in the Persian front.
So Alexander's basically baiting Bessus and those powerful Scythian cavalry, daring them to try and flank him, knowing that the wider they move, the weaker Darius's own center becomes.
Precisely. It's incredibly risky, but brilliant if it works. And the move immediately triggered exactly the reaction Alexander wanted, or at least expected. A fierce reaction on his extreme right flank.
The Persian cavalry charged.
Bessus ordered his Scythian and Bactrian cavalry forward. Seeing Alexander's right wing extending outwards, they charged hard, trying to execute the very flanking maneuver Alexander was inviting, trying to get around his edge.
This must have been a moment of real crisis right at the start for the Macedonians. Their right flank under immense pressure.
Oh, it was brutal. The sources say the Macedonian right was often hard-pressed, fighting right on the verge of disaster at times. The Scythians and Bactrians were numerous, heavily armed, excellent horsemen.
How did Alexander handle it?
This is where the discipline and the reserve system paid off. He didn't panic. He fed in just enough support units, things like Menidas's Greek mercenary cavalry, Aristos' Paeonian light cavalry, just enough to slow them down, contain the attack, and prevent a complete breakthrough.
But he didn't commit his best troops yet.
Critically, no. He kept his strategic reserve, the elite companion cavalry with him, held back, waiting for the perfect moment. He wouldn't be drawn into committing them too early just to fix a flank problem.
Okay, so chaos on Alexander's right flank. Darius, seeing this, must have thought, now's the time.
Exactly. He launched the weapon he'd prepared the whole battlefield for, the 200 scythed chariots.
This was supposed to be the decisive blow.
This was supposed to be the battle winner for Darius. They charged forward, aiming straight for the main Macedonian phalanx, aiming for that psychological shock and the physical devastation those spinning blades could inflict on a dense infantry formation.
Terrifying. How did the phalanx possibly deal with that? Did they break formation?
That's the incredible part. They didn't break. They had a layered, sophisticated, pre-planned response that required unbelievable discipline under pressure.
Layered. What were the layers?
It was basically a two-phase operation. Phase one, before the chariots even reached the main heavy infantry line, they were targeted by light infantry skirmishers positioned out front, particularly the Agrionians, elite javelin throwers. They aimed for the horses and the drivers.
Trying to disrupt the charge before it hit.
Yes, Pick off some, disrupt the momentum, cause chaos within the chariot ranks. Phase 2. For the chariots that did get through the screen of javelins and reach the heavy phalanx, this is where the double line and the training paid off. The front ranks of the phalanx didn't panic or scatter. On command, they opened specific, pre-planned gaps or alleys in their formation.
They just opened lanes.
Just open lanes, maintaining tight formation on either side, but creating these channels. The chariots, having built up speed, couldn't really steer effectively. They just charged harmlessly through these alleys.
Straight through the phalanx.
Straight through the first line. And once they were through, they were in the space between the first and second lines, or behind the second line, where they were easily surrounded, the horses were tripped or speared, and the chariots were neutralized by light troops and infantry reserves waiting specifically for them.
So Darius's meticulously prepared ground, his special weapon, completely nullified.
Completely nullified by Macedonian discipline, foresight, and tactical planning. An amazing display of training.
Okay, the chariots are dealt with. The Persian cavalry on the left is drawn way out, still fighting fiercely against Alexander's right flank, but not breaking through. The Persian center, because Bessus moved so far left, is now stretched thin. Alexander saw this. This was the moment.
This was the moment. The tactical window he had been trying to create all along was probably fleeting. That critical, undefended gap the famous seam had opened up between Bessus's cavalry wing on the far left and the flank of Darius's royal guard unit in the center.
And Alexander didn't hesitate.
Seized the opportunity instantly, executed his calculated risk. He abruptly disengaged his companion cavalry from the holding action on the far right.
Pulled them out of that fight.
Pulled them out, possibly filtering in some rearguard infantry to cover the gap he was creating in his own line by moving them. And then, personally leading them, he formed his elite companion cavalry into a dense, powerful, giant wedge formation.
The classic cavalry wedge. Aimed where?
Not at the fighting on the flanks.
Yeah.
He aimed it straight for that newly opened seam, straight for the gap next to the king himself.
Right at the heart of the Persian army.
Right at the now weakened royal center. The wedge hit that seam like a battering ram, smashed into the flank of Darius's royal guard infantry and cavalry. The impact must have been just apocalyptic. You had the heavily armored companions thrusting their long cavalry spears into the faces of the Persian guards, followed immediately by the bristling pike wall of the supporting Macedonian infantry moving up behind them.
And Darius, he was right there.
He was right there, probably in a war chariot observing the battle. The ancient sources are pretty vivid here. They say Darius, seeing his elite royal guard being cut down right next to him by Alexander's charge, was among the first to turn and flee.
He just ran away.
That's how it's usually depicted. Whether his flight was instantaneous panic, or whether he saw the situation was hopeless and was trying to escape to rally forces elsewhere, that's debated. But the effect was the same.
The king fleeing is the ultimate signal.
Exactly. While the battle was physically far from over across the huge battlefield, psychologically, the battle for the center was won the moment the king, the absolute symbol of the Achaemenid Empire, fled the field. His departure triggered an irreversible rout in the center and the units closest to him. Commanders lost their focal point, the army lost its nerve.
But Alexander couldn't just chase Darius down, which was usually his first instinct after breaking the enemy center?
No, not this time. Right after his successful charge, as Darius was fleeing, he started receiving frantic messages from his left wing. From Parmenion.
What was happening over there?
Well, while Alexander was achieving this breakthrough on the right and center left, Mazaeus, commanding the Persian right flank, was having considerable success against Parmenion.
Parmenion's wing was the weaker one, right?
Yes, deliberately weaker. And Mazaeus' cavalry had apparently managed to push back and effectively encircle Parmenion's left wing. They were in serious trouble, facing potential annihilation.
So Alexander had a choice.
The classic commander's dilemma. Pursue the fleeing enemy king immediately, which could potentially end the entire war right there, but risk the complete destruction of half his army under Parmenion. Or turn back from the pursuit, let Darius escape for now, and go save his army.
What did he do?
He chose to aid Parmenion. He halted the pursuit of Darius and turned his companions and parts of the phalanx to relieve the pressure on the left wing.
A decision that brought him some criticism later, didn't it? People blaming Parmenion.
Precisely. Some accounts, particularly those perhaps influenced by Ptolemy later on, who wasn't Parmenion's biggest fan, criticized Parmenion. They suggested he was too slow, too cautious, or maybe even incompetent, and that his weakness forced Alexander to abandon the pursuit of Darius.
But it was probably the right military call.
Strategically, almost certainly. Losing Parmenian's entire wing would have been a catastrophic Pyrrhic victory. It would have cost him maybe half his veteran infantry and cavalry. His choice shows, arguably, incredible loyalty to his troops and sound strategic prudence over personal glory in that moment.
Okay, so while Alexander is turning his forces around, dealing with the crisis on the left, something else, chaotic and, frankly, kind of bizarre, happened back in the Macedonian center.
Yeah, this is one of the most fascinating and very human moments of the whole battle. Remember that gap Alexander created in his own phalanx line when he charged out with the companions?
The brigade under Simius couldn't keep up.
Right. A gap opened up in the main Macedonian infantry line. Some Persian and possibly Indian cavalry units, seeing this breach right in the center, charged straight through it. They got behind the main Macedonian front line.
A breakthrough. That sounds incredibly dangerous for Alexander. They could attack the phalanx from the rear.
That's what you'd expect them to do militarily. Attack the vulnerable rear of the phalanx units still engaged to their front, or swing around and hit Parmenian's embattled flank from behind. That could have been decisive.
But they didn't.
They didn't. Instead of exploiting the tactical opportunity, they did something else entirely. They charged straight past the fighting towards the Macedonian baggage camp located behind the lines.
To loot.
Primarily to loot, yes, but perhaps also, critically, to try and rescue Darius's royal family members, his mother Sisygambis, his wife, his children who were being held captive in the camp.
Prioritizing looting and a rescue attempt over a potentially battle-winning tactical move, that seems militarily foolish.
It really reveals a profound difference in military culture, maybe, or perhaps just desperation. For some of these Persian troops, maybe recovering the royal family held immense political and cultural significance, maybe overriding tactical sense in that moment. Or maybe they just saw riches.
Did they succeed?
No. Their desperation was their downfall. They reached the camp, but they weren't met by unarmed servants. They were met by the Macedonian Rear Reserve Phalanx, that second line we talked about, part of whose job was flank and rear security, which included protecting the camp. These Persian breakthrough units were successfully counterattacked, dispersed, and mostly eliminated by this rear guard. A wasted opportunity for the Persians.
So Alexander eventually relieves Parmenion, forces Mazaeus' successful wing to scatter as well once they hear Darius is fled. The battle is finally won across the field, but Darius himself got away.
Darius got away on horseback, yeah. The victory was absolutely overwhelming, total rout, but not technically complete because the enemy king was still alive, still free.
So what were the immediate consequences on the ground after the dust settled?
Just utter devastation for the Persian cause. The immediate spoils captured on the battlefield were enormous. Alexander got something like 4,000 talents of silver just from the camp. Darius's personal chariot, his bow, his shield, and those 15 Indian war elephants that were never really committed to the fight.
And politically.
The empire just fractured instantly. Babylon, the biggest city in the world probably, formally surrendered to Alexander without a fight shortly after. The satraps controlling the treasuries at Susa and the ceremonial capital Persepolis also surrendered. For all intents and purposes, the entire western half of the Achaemenid Empire was now Alexander's.
And Darius, he fled east, right? Trying to rally support.
Yeah, he fled east on horseback, hoping to raise a new army in the far eastern provinces. He sent letters out to the eastern satraps, places like Bactria, Sogdia, basically begging them to stay loyal, raise new troops, keep fighting.
But Gaugamela had broken his authority.
It shattered the aura of the Achaemenid king of kings. Loyalty just evaporated. It turned into self-preservation for most of those eastern governors.
Which led to Darius's final end.
His final, really tragic end came not on another battlefield, but at the hands of his own men. Bessus, the satrap of Bactria, the one who commanded the Persian left flank cavalry at Gaugamela.
The one Alexander drew out of position.
That's the one. He led a conspiracy of eastern nobles. They arrested Darius, maybe intending to hand him over to Alexander to curry favor, or maybe to lead the resistance themselves. When Alexander's pursued got too close, they panicked, stabbed Darius, and left him dying by the side of the road while they fled further east.
And how did Alexander react when he found his defeated enemy assassinated like that?
It's actually highly significant. The account suggests Alexander was genuinely saddened, maybe even angered. While he was utterly ruthless in conquest, he seems to have respected Darius as a fellow king, a legitimate ruler. And perhaps he resented Bessus for, stealing the final defining act of the war from him.
So what did he do?
He hunted Bessus down relentlessly, eventually captured him, had him brutally executed in a very public Persian-style mutilation, crucifixion perhaps, and he ensured that Darius's body was treated with full royal honors and given a magnificent burial ceremony back at Persepolis, the Achaemenid heartland.
Why do that for his dead enemy?
By doing so, Alexander wasn't just acting as a conqueror, he was deliberately positioning himself as the legitimate successor to the Achaemenid line, the one who avenged the murdered king. It was brilliant political theater.
So Gaugamela followed fairly quickly by the death of Darius. That really marks the definitive end of the Achaemenid Persian Empire after centuries of dominance.
Traditionally, yes, that's the turning point. The empire founded by Cyrus the Great was effectively over.
Before we wrap up, we should probably touch on the difficulty of knowing all this for sure. We mentioned the crazy numbers for army sizes earlier.
Yeah.
How do we, as historians, looking back over 2,300 years, approach the reliability of the sources for a battle like this? Especially when most accounts were written by the winning side or based on accounts from the winning side?
Yeah, it demands constant skepticism and careful comparison. We rely primarily on, a handful of key ancient historians who wrote later, like Arrian, Curtius Rufus, Plutarch, Diodorus.
And they don't always agree.
Not at all. Arrian is often considered the most militarily reliable because he claimed to draw heavily on the memoirs written by two of Alexander's own generals, Ptolemy and Aristobulus, men who were actually there.
But even that's biased, right? It's the official Macedonian version.
Inherently biased, absolutely. It's the narrative designed to show Alexander in the best possible light, justify his actions, emphasize his genius.
And the other sources.
Well, Curtius Rufus and Plutarch, they provide invaluable details and anecdotes, sometimes different perspectives, but they were often more interested in moral lessons, drama, personality, maybe less concerned with dry, factual, or tactical accuracy than Arrian was.
So you find contradictions?
All the time. Wild discrepancies sometimes. For example, that final ransom offer from Darius. Some sources say 10,000 talents, some 30,000, maybe even other figures. Even Alexander's own losses at Gaugamela are contested. Arrian gives very low figures, maybe a few hundred. Others suggest over 1,000.
So what do you do?
As historians today, you have to cross-reference everything. Look for points of agreement between independent sources. Question the motives and biases of each ancient author. Assess logistical plausibility. Could they really have moved 1 million men? Almost certainly not. You try to synthesize a narrative that makes sense, acknowledging the uncertainties and the rhetorical goals of the writers.
So maybe focus less on the exact numbers.
Exactly. Less on the precise numbers, which are probably lost to history, and more on the consistent themes. The fact of Alexander's outnumbered status, the types of troops involved, the key tactical decisions made, the overall outcome. The consistent fact is tactical superiority and leadership overcame massive numerical advantage.
Okay, so if we strip away the likely exaggerations, the propaganda, what does Gaugamela ultimately reveal about military command, about leadership, and about these huge turning points in history?
I think it reveals the profound difference between conventional, maybe predictable warfare and true strategic genius combined with tactical flexibility. Darius relied on sheer weight of numbers, his traditional cavalry advantage, and meticulously preparing the terrain for his specialist units, the chariots. It was a solid but ultimately conventional Achaemenid battle plan.
And
Alexander, by contrast, demonstrated incredible strategic flexibility, choosing the unexpected northern route, and then revolutionary tactical innovation on the field itself, that double phalanx line to counter flanking. The deliberate, risky, echelon oblique march to provoke the enemy and create a gap. And then that single, incredibly high-stakes, perfectly timed wedge attack aimed directly at the king.
That wedge attack, it really was the ultimate gamble, wasn't it? He risked Parmenian's entire wing being destroyed just for that chance, that window, to strike Darius directly.
It's the kind of gamble few generals in history would ever dare to take. But it's a leadership choice that really defined Alexander's entire career. He always focused everything on the decisive point. He understood that in this kind of monarchic warfare, taking out the enemy leader, the king, could end the entire war almost instantly.
So Gaugamela wasn't decided just by better soldiers necessarily?
Not just better soldiers, though they were incredibly well trained. It was decided by precision, timing, innovation, and that unwavering discipline of the Macedonian army. That allowed them to execute incredibly complex maneuvers under extreme pressure, like calmly opening their ranks to let scythed chariots charge through them. It really confirms that factors like logistics, terrain, training, leadership, and tactical adaptability are often far more important than just having more bodies on the field in these colossal military encounters.
So looking back, Gaugamela wasn't just the end of a long campaign or even just the end of Darius III. It really was the hinge moment, the point where the geopolitical balance of power irrevocably shifted.
Yeah, shifted from the ancient East, dominated for centuries by Mesopotamian and Persian empires, towards the West, towards the nascent Hellenistic world that Alexander's conquest would create. It launched centuries of Greek language, culture, and political influence spreading right across Western and Central Asia.
A victory of, perhaps, professionalism and tactical innovation over sheer imperial mass and tradition.
And ultimately, even though Alexander's own unified empire wouldn't last long after his death, the world he created at Gaugamela did. It ensured that Hellenistic culture would dominate the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East for the next 1,000 years, profoundly shaping the Roman world, and through it, much of what we think of as Western civilization today.
A truly world-ending battle, then, that cleared the ground for a completely new world to begin. Thank you for taking this deep dive with us today.